Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Tundra. I hope you're all staying nice and cozy and looking out at the snow from the right side of the pane of glass. We have a really great program today that I am very much excited to hear about, and it is very much at the top of all of our patients and families' minds about staying as independent and at home as long as possible, and the challenges that come with that. So I'm going to introduce our facilitator for this session, Susan Edgman-Levitan. She is the director of the Stokel Center for Primary Care Innovations and will lead us through this fantastic program. So please enjoy.
Great. Thank you. So welcome everyone. I want to echo Dr. Russell's reminder to stay warm and stay safe. And we have an amazing topic today that is clearly quite popular. And I think it's an issue that all of us think about, as well as our families. So, just quickly, before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that everyone except our speakers is on mute to avoid any outside noise or disturbances. If you have a question, and we've gotten lots of questions in advance of today's session, please put them in the chat, which you'll see in the very middle of the bottom banner of your screen. And you just click on chat and you can go in there and enter any questions. And we will have some time at the end of today's presentation, and we'll try to cover as many of those as we can. And I think many of them were already going to be covered by our speakers. If you want to change your view, go to the upper right-hand corner of your screen where you see view, and you can change it so that you can just see the speaker, or you can see the speaker in the gallery, which is all of us. If your picture gets a little bit jumpy, if you go down to the left-hand corner where you see the little video camera, you can click on that. You'll go off screen, but it will help your connectivity and it may help the quality of the picture. So with that, and one last thing, please don't put any personal medical information in the chat, because everything in the chat can be seen by everyone. But if you do have a medical question or issue, please reach out to your doctor or your care team, so that they can address whatever your concern is. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers today. I will tell you that you're going to be hearing from two of my favorite people at Mass General. Christine Ritchie is the Director of Research for the Division of Palliative Care and Geriatric Medicine, and she was the founding director of the Mongan Institute Center for Optimal Aging and Serious Illness Research. She's a board-certified geriatrician and palliative care physician and conducts research focused on optimizing quality of life for those of us with chronic serious illness and multimorbidities. Dr. Iezzoni is a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School, and she's based at the Health Policy Research Center that is also part of the Mongan Institute at Mass General. Dr. Iezzoni has conducted numerous studies examining the healthcare experiences of people with disability, focusing on primary, reproductive health, and cancer care. She's also explored home-based supportive services. Her most recent book, Making Their Days Happen, paid personal assistance services supporting people with disability living in their homes and communities, was published in 2022. She's a member of the National Academy of Medicine, and she also won the 2024 Robert Wood Johnson Foundation David Rogers Award from the American Association of Medical Colleges. And I will say that both Dr. Ritchie and Dr. Iezzoni are some of the leading researchers in this area. And so we are very, very lucky to have them here with us today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ritchie.
Thank you, Susan, and greetings, everyone. It's so good to see you all. Thanks for being here today. Before we get started, I want to start with a simple question for all of you. And is it possible, Susan, for folks to either we can raise your hand, I suppose, or there's also a little feature in the Zoom that is react, and it gives you a chance to also raise your hand there if you like to do the fancy Zoom things. But my question for you is, how many of you would like to stay in your own home, or in your own apartment or in your own condo as you grow older? So maybe not 100%, but very close to 100%. And that makes sense, right? I mean, that desire that you have is a desire that most of us have. And it's very human. And it's because our homes are where our memories are. They feel familiar to us. They kind of they represent us. It's where we feel comfortable and mostly in control. So that's really our focus today, is aging in place, and thinking about, what does aging in place mean, and how do we optimize our opportunities for aging in place in a way that really is safe and comfortable. So when we talk about aging in place, we're really talking about living safely and comfortably in our home or community with the supports you need as your health and abilities change. And that's the part I think we're going to spend some time on today, which is that our health and abilities are likely to change. And so it is not about aging alone. It's about planning so that we can stay safe, independent, and connected for as long as possible. And I think we often think of independence maybe too much without thinking about interdependence, because actually, in order to be as independent as possible in our home, it will require interdependence. So, I think when we think about successful aging in the home, what it does not mean is that you never need help. It actually will change as you age, and it will change as you change. And it might mean, and we'll go deeper on some of this from a planning perspective, getting a grab bar in the bathroom, better lighting in the hallway, thinking about who might be that person who will potentially help you with your groceries, thinking about who that trusted neighbor is who you might ask to check in if they haven't seen you in a bit. Using technology, we'll talk about technology in a minute, or having strategies for making sure we're keeping up with some of our healthcare concerns and medications. But it will not stay the same forever. And I think one of the things that is true for us our whole life, right, is our whole life we're adapting. Our whole life we are actually growing, and we are changing, and our life is changing. And that is part of our lived experience as humans. So I think thinking about that can be helpful for guiding us as we go forward, and also for helping us know when potentially our current living situation or our current home is no longer serving us well. And that might be, here's some potential warning signs. If we're falling a lot in our current home, if we're having trouble getting to the bathroom safely, even when we have put in the kinds of supports in our bathroom to optimize safety, if we're missing meds, our medications, or we're not able to eat as well, if we're feeling actually more isolated than we're comfortable feeling. And this is a big one, and Dr. Russell and I see this all the time, and that is stairs and managing stairs. And I think Dr. Iezzoni and I will talk about this a little bit too. But stairs are can be very challenging, and there may come a time when managing stairs, or the stairs in your home, can either need to be adapted or may warrant a change. When driving no longer becomes feasible, or when other people also start worrying about our safety. And sometimes we don't want other people to interfere with our lives or to bring up these things. What we can think about, though, is that when folks bring up issues about their concerns, is to welcome them as a friend and think about them as an opportunity to plan as we go forward. So Independence is not about your address. It's really about your safety, your dignity, and your quality of life. So here's a few things to keep in mind. I think I don't have to tell you some of these things. I think you know them. But we are lucky in our country and in our planet that we are living longer than we ever have before, which means that we, as part of that living longer, we are less likely to die suddenly and more likely to experience some level of functional decline before we die. And by and large, that means that at some point in our life, we will need some support with walking, bathing, cooking, shopping, or managing medications. And this will be true for about 8 out of 10 of us. So 8 out of 10 of us will require some level of support before we die. That's, for me, useful information. And I think about that for myself a lot, which is, you know what, this is my future. And now is my opportunity to think about sort of what I want to do about that. If we make it to age 85, about 1 in 3 of us may also be facing or living with dementia. And that can sound scary. But here's the part that often surprises people, and that is 3 out of 4 of us will never live in a nursing home. And for those of us who do end up in a nursing home, the average stay is usually months, not years. And we also know that actually the number of nursing home beds in this country actually has not changed for many, many years. And that's because we are learning how to live more safely and effectively in settings that are more home-like if they're not actually in our home itself. So here's sort of to wrap up this overview where we are, and that is at some point in our lives, most of us will need some help. Most of us will not live in a nursing home, and planning helps us stay where we want to be for longer. So the question is, how do we plan? And there are really 3 kinds of preparation: human resources, technology and tools, and financial resources. So let's talk about these. And when Dr. Iezzoni and I talk, we'll hear more from her. So first, human resources. This is really about people. And it's asking, like, who's on my team, right? Like, who would help me if I got sick? Who would help me if I fell? Who might, if I can't do it myself, drive me to an appointment? And these human resources don't have to be family. I think we often get stuck in this idea that thinking that it has to be family. It can be family, but it can be friends, it can be neighbors, it can be faith communities, it can be home health aides, it can be community programs. There are many different ways to get this level of support, but it does require planning. And it does mean for us of not thinking of aging as a solo sport. It's a team sport. And it also means accepting help. And for a lot of us, that's its own work, right? Like for some of us, accepting help is some of it, it's its own work. What about technology and tools? Well, if depending on your questions, we can talk more about this, but there are now so many awesome tools out there to support us that include alert systems for if we do fall, ways to communicate with others. There's fall detection devices, there's smart lights that turn on just when you come anywhere close to them. There are medication reminders, there are voice assistants, there's remote monitoring. So there's a lot we can do, again, from a planning perspective, but just remember, technology does not replace people. It supports people. And so it can give us peace of mind, it can buy us time, it can help us stay in our homes longer. And in the future, and there's some initial work already happening in the past year or two around robotics, those robotics may ultimately be able to help us better with lifting and cleaning and reminders. But human connection is actually what we as Homo sapiens, as a species, need, and it will always matter. And then the third thing is that we need financial resources. So it does require planning for costs. And this is where I find most Americans actually struggle. And that is, we plan for other things, like we plan for college, we plan for our vacations, we plan for retirement, but we don't actually plan for aging in place. Because that actually is also a cost, and it might be home modifications, it might be help in the home, transportation, medical needs. And so planning gives us choice. Waiting for a crisis takes the choice away. And so thinking about financial planning is not about thinking about fear, it's thinking about freedom. And preparing, I think of as not pessimistic, I think of it as power and hope. So let's now talk about the 5 pillars of aging in place. The first pillar, home safety and design. So again, Dr. Russell and I take care of a lot of folks who come into the hospital after they've fallen and fractured their hip or other such things. And here's the sad thing is that most falls do happen in our home. And they happen doing just regular stuff, like going down the stairs with the laundry basket, tripping, and then there you have it. Or being in your bathroom, getting up off the toilet and missing a step. So even small changes like grab bars in the bathroom or walk-in or step-free showers, lighting, critical. And like I said earlier, now with the sensors, you can get lights that you can plug into sockets where you need it, and they'll turn on when you walk past them so that they're there for you. So you have lighting when you need it. Really important. Avoiding slippery floors, removing loose rugs. Loose rugs are the bane of all of our existence. We like them, but they actually can be highly problematic for us. Having easy to open doors, and think about sort of your design of these sort of things in your home as things that quietly protect you. And then health and mobility. So I'm not going to spend much time on this, but staying healthy as much as you can does help you with staying independent. So anything you can do right now, be careful outside, of course, but you can do within your home or within some place to stay physically active, to work on your balance, to work on your strength. Really important. Movement is medicine, and even small amounts every day makes a difference. I think I sort of alluded to this, but the third foundation is social connection. So one thing that happens as we age is that we will often lose friends. And so our opportunity is to gain friends and to not think of friendship as static, but as a commitment to the future, that every time we enter into this world, we have the opportunity to gain new friendships, and that opportunity lives with us for our whole life. So thinking about being socially connected, staying in touch with friends, family, faith communities, doing volunteering, working, going to senior centers, doing FaceTime visits, all of those things are critical, and think of them as intentional things. So for me personally, I like being quiet and alone, and I know that will not serve me ultimately. That what will serve me is to be intentional every day and every week and every month about staying connected to people who matter to me and also building new friendships and new communities. Remember, and I think you've heard this on these town halls before, loneliness harms health. And staying socially connected is a way that you are connecting to others, giving to them, and they ultimately will give to you. The fourth pillar is transportation and access. Many of us will drive less or stop driving someday. That does not mean losing independence, but it does mean planning. So ride services, public transportation, community vans, delivery services, telehealth visits. We're in a better place now than ever to lose the ability to drive because there's so many alternatives. It does not, losing the ability to drive does not mean losing our life, but it does mean changing how we get around. And then finally, support systems and backup plans. All of us need a backup plan, or what I call a plan B, which is we have plan A, what we would like for life to look like, and then we have plan B. And so thinking about what that plan B might look like is pretty critical for going forward. Remember, accepting help is not a weakness, it's actually a strength, and it's how we preserve our independence. So, to sum up, before I have the opportunity to interview my colleague and friend, Dr. Iezzoni, most of us will live long lives. Most of us will need some help. Most of us will not live in a nursing home, but successful aging does not mean not getting help. It means actually planning intentionally about how we're going to stay connected and have choices. And the question I want to leave with you are three things for you to write down and think about for the future, which is, will my home be safe for the next 10 years? And if not, how can I make it safer? Who would help me if I got sick? And the third one, what is my backup plan? So, to illustrate the benefits and burdens of aging in place through lived experience is my wonderful colleague, Dr. Iezzoni, who you've already heard about. She is an amazing, amazing human who has done so much in this world to guide us around improving the lived experience, healthcare quality, and health equity of adults with disability, and particularly mobility disability. So, Dr. Iezzoni, welcome to our town hall. And
Thank you.
I just wonder if we could start, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been living in the current home.
Thank you so much. And it's just so amazing to see all these people here today. And I hope that I can be somewhat helpful to you, but I want to be clear that I am an extreme example. Okay, so I am not the typical person. I developed multiple sclerosis when I was 22 years old. That is a neurodegenerative disorder that has a different course for different people, but my course was somewhat progressive. So I developed MS when I was 22, as I said, and by the time that I was 34, it was obvious that I needed a wheelchair. I kept resisting that. I kept saying, people will think I'm not trying to walk. I should look like I'm trying further. But my career was advancing and I was going to Washington, D.C. all the time. And you can carry a suitcase actually if you're having trouble walking. And so I researched wheelchairs. And one of the things that I found was that scooter type wheelchairs were actually developed to be more friendly looking and have certain practical abilities to them. And I now have, I can't even tell you how many scooter type of wheelchairs because I have one on every floor of my house. But anyway, the main thing about them is that they have kind of like a captain's chair and a platform, a little basket in front of you, which is really, really helpful. But the captain's chair allows you to turn and swivel the seat. So if you need to transfer to another surface, it's easier to be able to swivel the seat and transfer that way. And so, again, the first article that I ever wrote about having a disability, I wrote about starting to use a wheelchair, and I basically said I'd been so resistant for so long, and what an amazing transformation it was for me. Because all of a sudden I could get out and go about and just be wherever I needed to be and feel safe that I wasn't going to fall. Now, let me just say one little thing, and that is I got three-wheel scooters. They're not entirely stable. And so I actually tipped in my scooter when I was in Washington, D.C., because the front wheel got caught in a little tiny pothole near the metro stop. And so it tipped me over. And so you have to actually if you're going to be using a device like that, you have to feel comfortable um, driving it around, and realize that there could be accidents. And let me just say that I was lying on the ground, people picked me up, and I was thinking to myself, should I go to the hospital or should I get on the airplane and ask the flight attendant for a bag of ice? And I did the latter, and so that was fine. So, my husband and I had lived in a two-family, and we had lived on the second and third floor. And when I started to use the wheelchair more, it became obvious that being on the second and third floor wasn't such a great idea. Um, but we bought a house that has 3 stories in a basement. Okay. And so I actually am on the third floor of my house right now, but I'll tell you a little bit about that. So we moved into a wonderful house that had that at the time I moved in, I was able to do what I call furniture surfing or wall walking. And furniture surfing is where you kind of basically put your furniture places that you can grab onto. And wall walking is where you kind of grab onto door frames or you kind of, lean against the wall. And for many years, I was able to do that. But in 2001, so we moved into that house in 1991, and in 2001, it was really obvious that I wasn't going to be able to get up the stairs from the first floor to the second floor. And at that point, we installed a stair lift that has two bends because we have kind of a landing and coat, so it kind of bends around. And that was fantastic. Um, Now, to get to my third floor where my office was, at the time, they didn't have the technology that allowed for a lot of bending, because to get up to my third floor, it's a very narrow stairwell. And so I had a contractor who just basically said, put your hands wherever you want a grab bar, and I'll put a grab bar there. And so I had like 7 grab bars all over this wall, that I would grab onto as I was going up the stairs. But technology advanced. And so now they're, 10 years after that, technology advanced. And so there were stair lifts that would allow you to go up these kind of twirling type of stairs that would get me to the third floor. At that time, I was kind of using walkers in the house, but it finally became clear that that just wasn't going to be safe for me. So I got little tiny scooters, that would fit through the door frames. And so I've got scooters on every floor. And so I don't walk at all in the house basically, at this point. Um, but the tipping point is, and what you will find, and I've kind of given you a sense of what various tipping points have been for me along the way. The tipping point that I'm currently confronting that actually terrifies me is that at this point I can still stand and pivot. So I can stand from my scooter and transfer onto the chairlift. I can stand from the scooter and transfer onto my bed. Once I can no longer do that, that's when you really do need humans. There aren't robotics that can really come in and help you safely transfer. And so the basic point is that, I'm kind of uh, keeping my teeth clenched and trying to do, and I try to do exercises. I made a New Year's resolution about 4 years ago that I actually have kept. And that was that every day I was going to try to do at least 20 minutes of exercises. And my exercises are like I use a leg lift device to lift my leg, and I try to do flexibility things. And so, even though I'm obviously not an athlete, I try to keep as physically fit within my limitations as I can to be able to maximize the length of time that I will be able to continue to live in this house. And I actually told my colleagues when we were planning this that, and this is where I will end, is that my husband and I are exploring right now with an architect whether we can put in a residential elevator into our house because in fact it's expensive to do that, but it might be less expensive than moving to an entirely new house or finding a new property that you do all the renovations on. Because let me just say one other thing, because I wanted to talk about cost, and this is where we kind of get into cost. Because a lot of adaptations that you do are relatively low cost, like putting in grab bars, low cost. And it's really just, Christine gave some other great examples of kind of low cost interventions like lighting and so on. Um, but there are going to be times when it will cost money to do the renovations that you need. I won't tell you because I'm kind of embarrassed, but we spent a lot of money making a totally open bathroom for me. Okay, there's no thresholds, nothing. I can roll right into the bathroom, roll right up to my commode chair. Um, I put in very high toilets because back in the day I was 5'10", and so I needed a toilet that was high enough for me as a 5'10"-ish person. Um, and so it is going to be important to think about the fact that there may be costs associated with making substantial renovations. But let me stop there and
Thanks, Lisa. There's so much good food for thought there. And I just wanted to highlight one thing that you said around cost, and how you were thinking about it, which is, can we do something here? And then how does it compare? And so certainly, either renting or buying another home is a cost. And so comparing that, I think a lot of people also think about, for example, what does it cost, for example, to be in assisted living? And I looked this up for Massachusetts just so we would have some guide. And on average, it costs in Massachusetts about $7,000 a month for assisted living. And so that's about $84,000 a year. And so, that can be a useful comparison if you're thinking about, okay, a different kind of home, what's that cost? Renovating my current home, what's that cost? And then if we would have to go to assisted living, especially if you don't have long-term care insurance, what would that cost? I think thinking about those different costs can be extremely useful. One of the questions I had for you, Lisa, was, you've provided so many wonderful examples of adaptations that you have made along the way. And I just wonder if there are any adaptations that you wish you had done earlier that might have made your life easier in retrospect.
well, as I said at the very beginning, I wish I'd started using a scooter earlier.
Mhm.
I just was embarrassed. I just thought people wouldn't think I was trying hard enough. That is a time when I was 34 years old, and so you can imagine that often people look at a younger person, um, but that was so stupid of me. It was really wonderful once I started using a scooter. I think that it was a friend. My late best friend was quadriplegic from primary progressive MS, and he was the one. and my late best friend also lived 250 miles away from me, but he knew what I was dealing with at home because we would talk all the time. We'd be texting all the time, FaceTiming all the time. And so he was the one who said, finally, you shouldn't be walking at home anymore at all. You really shouldn't. And so that's when, again, you can get little scooters, you can get little wheelchairs, because a lot of older homes have narrow doorways and narrow thresholds that you have to get through. And so that's what I've managed to do. And let me just say that finding the vendor for these items is actually not a trivial issue. Um, who is going to sell you the little scooter um, is is an issue. Because let me just give you one example. Uh, and this is highly unusual. Okay, so I don't want anybody to be scared by what I'm about to say. Okay, because the vendor of my scooters had never heard of this happening before. But one day I was in my second floor bedroom and the scooter sparked when I turned it on. And so I thought, probably not such a good idea to have a sparking scooter. And so trying to get it fixed so, it wouldn't do that again actually took the entire weekend. So I ended up having to kind of be on the second floor. My husband brought up a different scooter for me the entire weekend, but the vendor I knew pretty well because they've sold me so many of these that they were willing to do repairs because one of the biggest problems for wheelchair users is getting repairs of their wheelchairs, especially for people who have to use power wheelchairs that are complex, and where the parts are hard to come by and the vendors are very monopolistic. And so I think that, that's one of the biggest challenges that people will call me and say, well, who should I buy this from or who should I get that from? And that is actually a challenge.
Thanks so much for talking about that. I wonder, just in closing, before we give people an opportunity to ask questions, what advice would you give to people here today about um, what they can do to age in place, and then B, how should they know when it might be time for them to think about an alternative?
I am not a good example of how to know when to think about an alternative, Christine. I'm
Let's start with the
not
first one then.
Yeah,
Let's just
I'm
talk
not
about
yet
advice for
capable of
aging in
thinking about
place.
that. Remember, I just told you I was looking into a residential elevator, so I'm just like, what was your first question
So
again?
what advice would you give to folks who do want to age in place for as long as
Yeah,
possible?
well, I think that you need to be patient with yourself, and you re need to realize that it's going to be hard, um, and that it's also irritating and not entirely fun. But you have other aspects of your life that are fun. And so, really kind of building on, like, I have a particular hobby that I love that, Susan knows what that hobby is. And so, when I am able to get up onto my third floor where I kind of do my little hobby in my scooter, that just gives me so much pleasure. And so finding things that you really do enjoy. Now, let me just say that my husband stopped letting me cook years ago because I'm not safe with knives and I dropped casserole dishes out of the oven. You know, this was not a good thing. And so you talked about needing to think about the fact that it's kind of a family affair, if you will. And certainly actually it's my husband likes cooking because he's a very busy doctor, and he actually finds that when he comes home at the end of a busy clinic day, just being in the kitchen allows him to kind of just wind down and think about cooking rather than what his day was like. And so, I've benefited from that. But I think that you just need to, it's just part of life. It is just part of life. And and hopefully you can find good things.
I love that, Lisa. I love this whole concept of, yes, this is challenging, it can be a little irritating, and there's good things. And so living in that acceptance of both ands of
Mhm.
of the challenges and of the things that bring us still bring us joy are good ways to sort of stay in connection with both of them. So we do want to give each of you all some opportunities to ask questions and to reflect, and I think turn it over to Susan to moderate this conversation. Susan, you're on mute though.
Sorry. I just have to say, I am the very lucky and proud recipient of several of Lisa's gorgeous oil paintings, mostly of flowers, which we both love. So that is her little
Love that.
That's my
secret.
hobby.
That's her hobby. And boy, am I glad she has that hobby. And I think one of the things I think both Lisa and I have learned over the years is that when you lose the ability to do one thing, it becomes actually an interesting challenge and for I think both of us kind of fun in a weird way to figure out what you can do that's different that will also be entertaining and inspiring and rewarding because you just can't do X anymore.
Mhm.
And so you're constantly, not constantly, but you're often challenged to be creative. And one other quick thing I just have to say when Dr. Ritchie was talking about all the things you need to get rid of to avoid falling. I was in the hospital a couple of years ago and I had a rotation of roommates. And it was quite a lesson for me because every single one of them was someone who had fallen over their dishwasher door that they had left open and were in the hospital because they had a broken hip. So that was a cautionary tale for me. So I just want to add close your dishwashers to the list of things to
I love
be attentive to. Because it's actually it's quite amazing to me now that I became alert to that, how often it could be a challenge. Anyway, I want to ask a question that came up in different ways, but and I think it's very challenging, but can you say a little bit about what to look for if you've got a long-term care policy? The kinds of things you want to pay attention to, because I think many of them have gone through massive changes in the past several years that may or may not make them worthwhile. So, could you just say a little bit about that, Dr. Ritchie, or anyone else who
I
may?
would love to, and I'd also love my colleague Emily if she wants to jump in here too. Just as full disclosure, I have long-term care insurance, and it's very important to me. And my both my parents, my late parents, and my husband's parents had long-term care insurance, and that actually gave us a reason to look very carefully at this. I think with long-term care insurance, as somebody put in the chat, there are ones out there that are scams. So you do have to be really on your toes. And then there are ones that actually have been around for a very long time that have a very strong track record. The thing about long-term care insurance is though they become prohibitively expensive if you're actually trying to start getting them later in your life. They really are things that people should start getting in their 40s and 50s and not later because they become extremely expensive as we age. That being said, if you do have long-term care insurance, it's important to look at a few things. First of all, is when they can be activated and what kind of services they support. Most can be activated when you have needs, both with what we call instrumental activities of daily living, things like shopping, household cleaning, that kind of thing. And most especially when you have more basic needs around walking, dressing, bathing, etc. But each plan is slightly different. So first is to look at when they can be activated. And the activation process is usually a process. It's not just a one and done situation. And then the second is how long are they for? And a lot of times when the person gets long-term care insurance, they go through an actuarial process where someone decides that they will experience some need for functional support over 3 years or 5 years. And it's not uncommon for long-term care policies to only last for like 3 to 7 years. So you want to be aware of A, how long it can last, B, how when someone can activate it, and then C, can you turn it on and off? So for example, if you have a 3-year policy, can you use it for 6 months and stop and then start it back again, or is it a continuous? And these are the things that I've found in talking to colleagues who've been thinking about their own policies or whether or not to get policies or whether or not to activate their policies often run up against. So that's my short answer to what could be probably an hour-long conversation about long-term care insurance. But there is a lot to be said for long-term care insurance, and you really have to have your eyes wide open and look at the fine print.
Thank you. Thank you. So, a lot of the questions that came in advance, I think we've touched on, but a couple we really haven't. And one that I think is really important is, can either of you say something about options for independently living seniors who really don't have any family? How do you arrange in advance for total, if there's a sudden need for total care management and that sort of thing? Any thoughts about that?
I'll start. Is Emily on? Because I think Emily may have some perspectives about this. Emily, you want to
I
shout out?
think she was, but
Okay. So a couple of things. So Monique, you're muted though.
Sorry, I needed Monique to unmute
There
me.
she is. There she
I'm
is.
here.
Okay, good, Emily. So I'll start, but then I'd love for you to jump in. So a couple of things. There are a number of ways for you to increase your social connection that are a part of essentially Massachusetts and Boston. And I'm going to give you one example, but this is just one example. So Friendship Works is a nonprofit in our community that actually is all about connecting people with each other. And you could either join as a volunteer or you can join as somebody who would benefit from their services. The Village Movement and Beacon Hill Village is one of the villages in our community, also has a lot of resources, including geriatric care management support and a lot of actual sort of daily support services that allow for people to age in place. You can also hire geriatric care managers to guide you through this process. So there's actually a plethora of options out there, but some of it's sort of knowing which questions to ask. And Emily, I'm sure, gets asked this question a lot. So Emily, who's one of our amazing social workers in our geriatric practice, may have some additional thoughts.
Sure. I think for a lot of people, a good starting point can be the local elder service agency, um, or the local council on aging. And most of the local council on agings have social workers or outreach workers, and you can make an appointment and go see them, or they have a lot of informational um, workshops and groups on a lot of that touch on a lot of these topics. And actually, at the local at your local elder service agency, they actually have something called options counseling, which can be another good place to start if you, even if you're not ready, you don't really need in-home supports right now, but you're trying to do some planning, which I think is part of, one of the big points that's been raised today is to do some planning. They can be really, really helpful resources, both in giving the range of choices, but also, for example, and I know somebody put in a question about lower income seniors. They can help with applications to low income senior housing. Elder Services also has options for reduced fee in-home supports. And I can put a phone number, if you're not sure which is your local elder service agency, you can call Mass Options, which is the Massachusetts Elder hotline, to get more information about which elder area agency on aging serves your town or city.
Great. So I just put in the chat. There was a question about where can you get help with downsizing? And I just put into the chat 2 resources that I have used and am aware of that I think are really great and helpful. More Than Words and the Habitat for Humanity Restore. They both will come to your house and pick things up for free. And usually, I think Habitat for Humanity may charge a little fee, but they're wonderful organizations, and I recommend those. A question that I think is actually quite timely right now, given all the weather challenges and the natural disasters that seem to be happening in so many places. And it's actually just been an issue for friends of ours who live in a multi-story building that lost all of its power and had no ability to help people that were wheelchair bound on higher floors to actually leave easily. So any thoughts or recommendations? There was a question about what we need to think about in terms of emergency evacuation or situations, that I know, and I have lots of friends actually in California with the fires that have dealt with this, and it can be quite challenging.
Again, all of these things are much easier to think about before the fact.
Right.
So thinking about sort of what is feasible for you and when things might not be feasible for you now is much better than thinking about it later. So thinking about emergency egress is actually a very, very important one. And I think in one of the questions that we received before the town hall, it was like, how would you know when it's time to think about a different alternative place to live? And I think these are some of the things that you would ask yourself, which is it, can I get out of my situation safely and quickly if the power were to go down or something like that? And what would be my options? And are there alternative options within the facility that I'm in? So I think these are important questions to ask now when you can think about them without there being any kind of crisis. There was also a question in the chat, Susan, about CCRCs versus assisted livings or continuous care continuous care retirement communities versus assisted living. And I would just say a couple things about continuous care retirement communities. For some folks, these are great options because they do allow a different kind of aging in place. That is when one's needs change with respect to needs. Often the only change that's required is potentially moving within a campus of the continuous care retirement community as opposed to moving someplace really different. And it generally is useful if folks are sort of wanting future security and they want to sort of make a change ahead of needing the change. Because they essentially allow for independent living and then additional support all the way up to nursing home care. There usually is some level of clinical and medical support. They allow for all sort of the tiers. Assisted living does not do that. Assisted living is more for people who are preferring to be at home until they can't be at home. And then they would make that change then. And by and large, continuous care retirement communities are tend to require a lot more financial resources because there's usually a large entrance fee, and there's like a monthly sort of HOA type fee that are there. That being said, if you have those resources, it's a more predictable cost than the kind of unpredictable costs that often occur when people are electing to stay home for longer periods of time.
Great. Lisa, do you want to add anything?
Um, I just wanted to add, and this goes back a couple of minutes ago, that people who have equipment that requires batteries or being charged, that can be a problem. If the elevator's down and there's no power in the building, somebody who uses a power wheelchair could be in really, deep trouble. And so I think thinking about batteries, additional batteries for those kind of situations is really, really critical. And certainly, in my community, there are people who use ventilators and who use kind of technologies that require electricity. Um, those situations do require a lot of proactive thought.
Yeah, the thing that was an issue that I think surprised our friends is that the stairwells had no emergency lighting in them. So it was pitch black on
Oh,
top of everything else. And so they are going to get the building to do things they should have done a long time ago. But
yeah.
that's just a sort of a thing to look at and think about if you don't have that kind of lighting, and you would need to leave.
Mhm.
So I think we are almost at the hour. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Russell and see if he has anything that he would like to add. I want to thank our speakers. I think we've touched on so many different topics we could spend hours on, and I'm so grateful that everyone attended today because I think this is such important and rich information with lots of nuances and complexities to think about. And I just think your advice to be proactive and not wait until you have to make a decision tomorrow is so incredibly important. And it's also a gift to your families and your friends. So, Dr. Russell, are you still with us?
I'm right here. I'm right here. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, Dr. Iezzoni and Dr. Ritchie. This was certainly something that, even 20 years into doing geriatrics work, I learned something new today. And I'm somewhere between 40 and dead, so I probably need to get my own long-term care insurance in place. The themes of reframing and not equating independence with having to scale the mountain without any equipment is so important because we're so much more than just our body. And we also have to live in our body and acknowledge reality. And it's just so great to hear this and to know that these are so individualized and so nuanced, as you said. But there are a lot of people in our community that really want to help people stay in the house, and just even hearing about that is really inspiring. So I want to thank our speakers. Thank you, Susan, for moderating. Wish you all a safe indoors winter. Please don't add to the statistics of broken bones. Let the trash rot on the porch. Don't feel the need to go out to the barrels. And stay well and stay healthy. And we'll see you next month when our topic is, you just put it up there. What fills your winter entertainment? So this is going to be a lot of opportunity to discuss great reads, great watches, and things that can help the winter months go by with a little more delight. So please stay well and take care, everyone.
Yes, close your
Thank you.
dishwashers and bring your favorite shows that you don't want to tell anybody you watch to our next town hall or books or anything for that matter. Take care, everybody. So good to see you.
Bye.